Alright, hello everyone, welcome to, so you want to bake your model in Blender for Altspace. Just figured I'd make a really simple, quick tutorial because it's not a lot to do. It's pretty generally understandable and a lot of people have asked me about this, so why not? I'm assuming most of you know how Blender works, so it's mostly going to be just me like going through doing general Blender stuff and hoping that you can follow along. If you actually need like Blender help, I'd recommend starting out with some tutorials first and then coming back to this video because some of the things in here may or may not make sense if I just suddenly do it and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? You know? Also, you could, of course, ask in the Slack because I'm going to assuming you guys are going to be in there. If not, throw a comment and I'll see if I can help. So I created a very general scene here. I actually forgot to set these viewport colors, like that really matters, but we've got a gray half cylinder. I just threw a solidify modifier on it to kind of thicken it up. So we have this cylinder thing. You'll see why in Altspace later. So for now, we've got a cylinder. We've got an emission block here, and we've got some sunlight on it. So it looks pretty like generally nice in Blender. A little bit of pink on one side, a little bit of brightness on the other side, and otherwise very dark gray. Now we need to bake this. What do I do? So it's pretty simple. Basically, you make a new image and you say, I want this image to be named this, and I want this image to have this size. Now, for this, I might as well make it 1K because why not? But I mean, for the most part, you wouldn't make something 1K in my opinion unless it's like a landscape or something huge that you're going to be exploring, and you need that number of pixels so that when you look at a giant wall and it's a part of 500 walls and you look at it close up, you don't see massive pixels if you make it like 216 or 512. So we'll make this a 1K image. We'll call it Tut Bake. Obviously, what you call it in Blender doesn't really mean much. That's just whatever you want to call it. Now, you tab into edit mode. You select all of the vertices on your mesh. You hit U and unwrap or smart UV project. So smart UV project, it gives you an angle limit, which I just leave the same. It gives you an island margin and an area weight. The only thing in this that you need to change, if you want, is your island margin, and every number is the percentage distance compared to the size of the image, I believe. The percentage distance between the edges. So if I give it no island margin and I just project it, it goes boop and it takes, you can see these are all of the sides, maybe on the inside here. These are all of the edges or faces on the outside. These are all of the edges on the top of the cylinder. These are all the edges on the bottom. So you can kind of make out what it is when it's a very general primitive shape like this. So this is no island margin. The lines are literally like right next to each other, and sometimes if you bake, and especially if your image is a smaller size, like 128, 216 to 512, the edges will kind of bleed into each other. So one face will start to show what the other face next to it in the image sees, or vice versa. That can be very annoying, and you can fix it yourself, but it takes a lot of time. So the best way to avoid that is give yourself, I think the maximum that people said is a 4 to 5% island margin, so I usually stick with 3. You do that, and it just puts a little bit of a distance between the islands, the groupings of faces that it kind of creates for itself, and that gives a little bit of room to bleed into each other before they actually start seeing what the other faces were creating when they bled. So yeah, you've got yourself this cool little baked thing, but it's a big black box, and you're like, well, what do I do? Well, obviously you want to get what this looks like, what you see here, to be on there, and it's simple AF. You make sure you're in cycles render, take your image and drag it over into each material node of your mesh. So if you have 20 materials, each material node you have to drag tut bake the image texture in and then make sure it's selected in that material. Then you bake it. So yeah, you've got your nice little thing here. You go over to render, and I believe, let's see where it is here. Sampling. If you go under to sampling, Your preview sampling is what you see when you shift Z, and it gives you path tracing sample up to 32. So this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing 32 samples. When you render it, you get a different number of samples. That it defaults to, I don't remember. I've got it set to 128. When I first learned, they were like, 128 is pretty good, or find a sampling rate that fits you, but don't go too big because it'll take a long time. I currently bake at 2K textures in my actual like full modeling setup. In my, what would you call that? Your workforce or something along those lines. So it is up to you, but the higher the render samples, the less total like fireflies and individual spots you'll see on your mesh. And a lot of people will be like, well, I got all these fireflies. What's going on? It's because you're baking at a really low sample rate. So that's why I threw it up at 2K, and most faces are perfectly smooth. You can still see the differences in light, but it's really, really smooth, and there aren't these tiny little fireflies scattered around. So we'll render at 128 because obviously this is a tutorial video. You don't need to do anything insanely huge. But I also render at 2K. I should also tell you I have a 1070, and it still makes most 1K images take 10 to 15 minutes to bake. So if you guys plan on doing insanely huge file sizes, like, hey, I want to make everyone load an 8K image, and you bake at 2K samples, you're probably going to sit there for an hour just like fucking around because your computer's going to be like, oh, what are you doing? But 8K images, when would you need an 8K in Altspace? Obviously, optimizing for mobile wouldn't allow for that. So, enough talk. Let's bake this. Click bake. It starts counting up your percentages. We're baking 128 samples into this. It's basically every sample is like, I'm going to say one light ray from each object. Something along those lines is how it works. So it calculates based off of the number of bounces that you give it where a light source is going to bounce between, and that's one sample. So you're doing 2,000 samples. I think it's 2,048 because, yeah. So 2048 samples, that means 2048 light rays bouncing around your room or your scene or your objects, etc., to give a very smooth look. That's also, keep in mind, that's for my low poly thing. And my low poly style is no textures, only diffuse. So a high sample rate is mainly because I want everything to look really pretty. Because I don't have textures, people are going to be only seeing a straight color, and fireflies on the colors are going to stand out a bit more. But yeah, so we're almost finished baking, and boop, it's finished. Now, baking map saved to internal image, save it externally, or pack it. That means you have it here. You have an external image. If you tab out of edit mode, you won't see the island highlights. You can see what it looks like. So we've got the square kind of fading off from our emission here. You can see all of these faces here. These two and some of these ones are the interfaces because that's where the sunlight is being caught. So yeah, that's the generally. So now it's baked. Now what do? I'm assuming maybe people skip this step, or maybe you just don't know what you're doing, but you actually have to save this somewhere else and then pull it back into Blender. So you save it as image. We'll call it tutbake. I'll throw it on my desktop. Tutbake PNG. Let's make it, there you go. Simple, right? Cool. So now you can, I believe this is the point at which we would go to Blender Render. Blender Render. Go back over to your material. You actually have to turn off nodes. So you have to click this little gray box, so it becomes a lighter gray box. And then you'll see that it kind of becomes the color of what it was before. So nodes aren't working. Go into texture, and make yourself a new texture and call it whatever you want. This will be tutbake, because it's the same thing. You select tutbake, and that's what you're doing. You're good at that point. So if I export this right now, it will export with this texture. It will navigate to tutbake, and it will export tutbake to the same directory that you export the model. However, it's good. I do this. I'm not sure if it's super important, and you can experiment with this if you want. But I've read that if you, and I've experienced this a little bit myself, if you save tutbake or if you save your texture to a different folder from the root or from the same folder that your Blender file is located. When you export the model, it'll actually navigate through those folders in the file path of the texture settings on the like OBJ or GLTF or buffer geometry if you're doing that. So you actually have to go in and change that to just the name of your texture. So then it'll only search the root folder for the texture. Obviously the way to fix that is I take Blender and I save as and I call it tutorial and I put it in the desktop. Now it's just navigating to / tutbake. It's going to only search the root folder that it's in, which is the desktop, and find tutbake. That means when you export it to wherever your folders are on GitHub or whatever in the future, it'll find it in the same root folder. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Anyways, enough blabbing. One last thing that you should look at is pop over to your texture view and you don't see anything. You actually have to, and this is a weird thing, I think it's just because Blender rendered saves different internal settings than Cycles render or something along those lines. You have to tab back into edit mode and you actually have to reselect your texture in edit mode and then you'll see a perfect copy of your model. Another issue, and this is something only I'm getting, I'm assuming other people may not have this problem. It's probably just some, oh wait, actually I think I'm stupid. I think I just remembered what it is. Shadeless, there you go. Remember to scroll down in your, your N view to shading and click on shadeless because Blender Render has its own fake shading because it's a jerk and it will actually shade over your texture and make it difficult to see some things. Turn on shadeless, you'll only see what the texture has. So now we can see where the faces are lit from the sun shining on it. We can see the purple from our little emission cube. And yeah, that's generally it. So bake this cool thing, and then you go export. I have the non-Blender 2.0 GLTF exporter. I'm going to wait for that to get a bit better. So this is the other exporter. So pop over to the desktop, tutorial.gltf, that works. Make sure it's set to Y up, -Z forward, selection only, so you don't export everything in your scene. Do not interleave the vertices, but that's the thing that like destroys the vertexes and stuff that you've read about. Or you've heard about. People will bring it up in Altspace often. And I like to embed the buffer data because if you have multiple objects and you can't rename the buffer data, you have multiple objects, they're all creating a buffer data. It's just going to be, you're going to have to make a folder for each object because they have the same name. So they'll start overwriting other objects' buffer data unless you embed it into the main GLTF. Plus that's one less file that you have to deal with. It's like the better thing for OBJs and MTLs because you're eliminating the MTL in this case. You're eliminating the second part of the file, so it's only the file and the textures. Anyways, that's it. Everything else should be as is. If you don't have these checked, you can check these because that's what I use, so it might be a good idea to do that just in case. But I'm pretty sure this is the default settings that you're just changing a few things. So tutorial GLTF, export, boop, you're done. Simple AF, right? Cool. Now, I'm going to continue this video for people that don't know how to GitHubify. If you don't know how to GitHubify your objects and actually get them in Altspace, we can do that too. So, here's my GitHub. I was stupid and I didn't actually take different projects in GitHub and split them into their own repositories. This is all just one repository with 500 projects because I'm a smart person. But we're going to make a new folder. We're going to call it tutorial. And tutorial is going to have meshes. It's going to have whatever the frick else that you want in your folder. Go to meshes, find tutorial GLTF, and your tutbake. Stick them in there. It might be also better to pop into icon view just so you can see your textures as opposed to details. So yeah, we have tutbake and we have tutorial. When tutorial is imported, it'll automatically search the main folder for tutbake because I made sure to set it to relative path in Blender. If not, I would have to open the tutorial GLTF. And let's do Notepad++. And you'd basically look for tut_bake. Find the next time that it mentions tutbake. And it would say URI, because for some reason they did do that. They say images, image tutbake, URI. this wouldn't say, oh, quote unquote type bake PNG. This would say quote unquote desktop / my folders / don't look at this, it's porn / tutbake.png. So you would have to eliminate all that and make sure it only says tutbake.png. So that's generally how it works. It's pretty simple. Just obviously it's an extra step that you don't want to have to do for every single thing that you do, right? Right. Anyways, onto the thing again, because I keep getting sidetracked. Hopefully I'm being quick. I know I make really long tutorials, so hopefully you're understanding everything that I'm doing and I'm not overloading you. Anyways, you open up your GitHub, you say, I hope you understand how this works too. I'm not going to take the time to explain GitHub because I don't even remember how to set it up, but there are tutorials and things on that as well. You open up your GitHub thing and you say, I like to say plus tutorial mesh made a simple solidified cylinder mesh to be used for the YouTube baking tutorial. Yeah, I know, right? I'm a little confused sometimes when I type. There you go. You hit commit. Make sure to sync that with the actual GitHub. And then, because I'm a lazy bum, or because I want to show you what I'm doing, I'm going to go over to my GitHub. Stupid me, not Zarathax GitHub.io. GitHub.com /Zarathax GitHub.io. I go over to tutorial /meshes. And I have tutbake.gltf. If I click, or tutorial in tutbake, if I click on that, I go to my URL and I copy the GitHub URL to that, and then I type in rawgit.com. That actually gives you the working file that you're going to be pulling, or the working link that you're going to be using to pull the file into your web. CDN will permanently cache that link. So if you type cdn.rawgit.com /Zarathax/Zarathax.github.io / all those characters and everything, it will always take you to whatever is in the folder when you typed the cdn.rawgit link. Rawgit.com will constantly check to see if that URL actually exists. In other words, it's not caching it to their official system. Caching it is nice because, like, for some reason, sound files like waves and stuff will not, they're just jerks. But we're just going to keep this baking to information. So, you've got this. Grab your Rawgit link. Now let's go to my resource code. Let's clone this. We can get out of Rawgit in here, and we can get rid of all of this JavaScript because that's all code for my other room. I'm just cloning from this so that I have the script source information and the basic beginnings of the code. Yeah. So, we have a scene. We have components, stuff like that. Cool. You go A-E. There we go. Also, make sure you have A-frame-GLTF version to your drive. It's probably higher than 0.2.0. I'll ask him about that later. But you need A-frame. Obviously, you need your Altspace SDK. Make sure you have NoreBX A-frame-GLTF loader. I believe you need that. You do A-GLTF-model. ID equals tutorial source equals open quote the Rawgit link. I'm going to enter because it just looks, you can make extra lines so it's not all one line. You can do position equals 0. Let's make it 2 to the right or 2 to the left, 0. Rotation equals 0, 0, 0. Scale, it's probably huge, so I'm going to make it 0.5 just in case. End that line, and then of course /a gltf model. Also, if you're wondering what I did there, Control A and then Shift Tab will automatically, at least in JSPN, will automatically align everything how it should be. That can break some things like rich text format because it includes indentations into the text, so you actually have to backspace the indentation back to the beginning. I'll explain that in detail if you ask me on the Slack or something. But otherwise, yeah. So now you've got your tutorial and you've got your JSPN link. From here, it's I just broke that code. Cool. So we have that sync saved anyways. You go to Altspace. I'm going to go to empty playground. Pop over, type in your JSPN link. Boop. Hey look, a cylinder. Cool. So that's my bake. Exactly. Obviously, it's the 100% the cylinder. Also, it's a lot bit smaller than I expected it to be, so I'm going to go ahead and paste /edit question HTML so it doesn't open the output and load the object in the game. A lot of what I'm saying probably won't make sense to you, but meh. Let's actually make this 222 so that it looks nice. Let's make its position 1 higher, because I might need to do that. And, oh yeah, let's do that other stuff. Also, by the way, JSBin doesn't like the dash symbol, so if you try to type a dash, or whatever you want to call that, it will actually act as if you just hit the insert button and start typing over your code. You can hit the dash again to turn off your fake insert. So anyways, you just have to highlight by using shift navigation to highlight your subtract symbol, Control C. I know I go through a lot for JSBin, but I love her. N mesh collider equals type environment. That means we collide with it and can teleport onto it. Convex true. So reload the room. You have a big collider here, or a big cylinder here. If I walk into it, I walk into it. I can't move through it. If I walk into it on this end, I also can't move through it. This is convex true. This is what happens for default. It takes the left edge, or it takes basically each edge of your object and draws a fake line from the edge to the next edge, if this makes sense. So basically hollow things, it doesn't matter because it only traces the outer edges and places faces over that. It's for things that are hollow, that are extremely detailed, like my cave system, that have so many different places you could go. If you set convex to true in the cave system for Prithultha, you wouldn't collide with the cave. You would just collide with the caves because there's a wall, and that would be so many less faces that it would have to create. So it's basically for optimizing. But if you actually need to be able to enter that thing, you have to specify convex false. Reload the room. And woo! And now you can curl around the inside of the cylinder here. So that's the general, that's the gist of baking for Blender, throwing it in GitHub, and getting it in Altspace. I hope this tutorial isn't like 20 minutes, but I'm looking at the time, and I think it's like 20 minutes, so I'm really sorry about that. But information overload. You should be able to do everything yourself at this point. Any questions for anybody, ask pretty much anyone in the in the Slack, or ask me in the YouTube comments, etc., and I will help as much as possible. Yeah, I hope this helped, and see you all later, or probably in Altspace.